Hey, it's Mountain Jay from Tell Your Trail,
Hey.
and we're gonna have a second interview with Ryan. Super excited. If you haven't seen the first interview with Ryan, please have a look down below in the description and you will find a link to that one if you haven't seen it. And today we're gonna talk about his experiences on the Continental Divide Trail in 2018, and we'll talk a bit more about how he changed from hiking in general to making it a lifestyle and sacrifices and everything that comes into play while doing it. So super excited, and yeah, hope you will enjoy it too.
Perfect. So if you enjoy these interviews, make sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. And now let's dive into the interviews.
Enjoy. Hey Ryan, welcome back. It's great to have you back on the for another conversation. Um, we had a great chat last time where we touched upon the start of your hiking adventures. Bit more discussed about friends, trail family, the community, um, and yeah, we want to pick it or continue on that and start talking about the year 2018, which you did the CDT, the Continental Divide Trail. And in our previous talk, you did say um, that was kind of a turning point for you in terms of how you were approaching hiking. Um, so maybe we can start off by having a bit of a chat about the CDT and your experience, and then continue from that.
Yeah, thanks guys. Thanks for having me back on. Another week down, right? Just keep on rolling. But
Yes.
yeah, the CDT. I didn't know it at the point when I was on the CDT, but it kind of was that steamroll year for me. Of course, it was the last kind of big three trails like the AT, PCT, CDT, and even having done like the AT and PCT, like there's so much out there on those trails. And even though like it had opened my view, my kind of focus was still very narrow. My focus really wasn't outside of each trail system each year. It was kind of always within, hey, I'm going to go out there, just enjoy the journey for the journey. And it's still that way a lot of the time I hike. But the CDT, it was more so near the end because everybody kind of hyper focuses on those big three trails. And the CDT, I was going to be finishing the big three. So the question kept arising was like, what's next? Can I continue this life? Are there more trail systems out there? Like when I say I was very narrowly focused, I'd heard like rumors of other national scenic trails. I'd heard rumors of other trail systems, but I didn't really branch out and look into those because I was so consumed by just wanting to be hiking on that trail. And I loved being able to be purely on that trail. So that question kept creeping into my mind as I would get closer and closer to the end of the CDT is, what are you going to do next? Because you could go back and do this cycle. There are some hikers out there that finish the big three and then they just recycle them. They go back to the AT, they go back to the PCT, they go back to the CDT. And
Okay.
I loved every single trail system. And there's a saying out there that when you do these trail systems, if you do them 7 times, they're going to always be different because each day you're going through the same environment, but some stuff has changed. You're not going through that exact day, exact weather, exact mentality. So like when your mentality shifts, that day that you could have loved past, you might not be great about it because there could be a thunderstorm up there, or the day that you weren't a fan of what might be one of your favorite days in the same exact section. So I could have done the cycle, and I do want to eventually touch back onto these trails because they have a big pull to me because they're the biggest and they're most supported. But the CDT really had me start thinking about where was I going to go next, and it took about 3,000 miles to kind of figure that out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you had hiked the PCT and the Appalachian Trail, and then you came on to the CDT. You mentioned previously that it's different. There's less support. It's harder, more challenging.
Mhm.
Can you tell a bit more about your experience?
Yeah, definitely. So the CDT, it's challenging in a different way. So the AT was more physically challenging than the PCT, and then the PCT was more challenging when I say mentally, it's not like it was a different mental type of struggle. It was mentality of having to hit weather windows. You had to get through the desert before you got heat stroke in the desert. You had to get through the Sierras before you got socked in, and you had to get up through Washington before the Washington rain came and the forest fires of out west. So it was a different mentality. It started shifting my mentality of I can sit back into a pace, but I can't get too comfortable and really sit too far back into it. And I also was changing into a different hiker at that point. But the CDT is kind of where it kind of all accumulated. It was like a hybrid blend for me personally of the AT and the PCT. Take apart the AT with the immense amount of support, immense amount of people out there. If you leave that out and bring in the steep climbs of the AT, that comes over to the CDT. And then if you bring in the out west vibes of huge mountain ranges and kind of gradual climbs and gradual, it's such a big trail that it has both.
Yeah.
So it has both aspects, and the kind of they have a saying out there, embrace the brutality. And it is true because you start off in a desert, but the desert's not the same as the PCT. It's a very, very, very barren desert. I mean, it is cow tanks for water, and sometimes that water source might be 20, 30 miles away. So it's a very different mentality, even in a similar environment. And we had told one of our buddies as we started hiking that we don't get sunburnt on our legs. For some reason, we believed dirt blocked the sun from our legs. And within the first 3 days on the CDT, we had 2nd-degree burns on the back of our legs from the sun. And he's like, "Oh, I thought you didn't get burned." I'm like, it's a different desert because we didn't get burned on the PCT. It's like, we didn't know this was going to happen. So it was a higher elevation desert. So you had to get used to that. The sun was baking you. There was no shade. So even the desert section on the CDT was a giant difference and a giant kind of opening of the eyes and the mind of how different these environments could be, even if they're very similar in the ecosystem itself. So that was at least a desert. If you, I can, it's 3,000 miles, so I can continue going down it. But yeah, just let me know what you want there.
That's pretty
amazing. Awesome. That's already a big challenge, I can imagine.
Yeah.
You start your hike on with that.
So I had no sunscreen because I didn't burn, and I also had no bandages because sometimes I'm stupid when I hike. But so I had these 2 buffs, like those things you wear around your head. So I made makeshift splints out of the buffs, not splints, but kind of bandages. So I tied them around the back of my legs, and I would spend all day just pulling them up. And I looked, there's also a term out there, more so for the AT and PCT, these bigger trails with less people, you don't see it as much, but there's a term, hiker trash. And I looked like hiker trash 2 days into a trail system. I'm like, I just got on this trail and I look like I've been beaten down incredibly. And it was a whole new world.
Yeah. But it didn't beat you down mentally?
It did. So after we got out of the desert, we hit Colorado. And Colorado is beautiful, but it was insanely brutal for us. We got there May 21st. And if you get into Colorado on the CDT at that time of the year, you're dealing with an absurd amount of snow, an absolutely absurd amount of snow. So we were post-holing past our waist, literally every single footstep, every day in Colorado, pretty much. Granted, there were some sections that you could open up and do 5 to 10, but if we were in the thick of it, we were post-holing all day. And we got into the San Juans, and it was just, so there's 2 loops on the CDT. So you can do the Creed cutoff, and then you can do, it's probably on the map actually behind you. So you can do the Creed cutoff, or you can do the San Juans. And it's like a little bubble in Colorado. And the San Juans are epically beautiful, huge mountain ranges that you go into. And the Creed puts you down into a valley for a safe weather alternate. And we were fighting with that decision as we were getting closer to it, because to even get to that point, our miles had dropped drastically. We were doing 20 to 25s, but we were waking up at 4 a.m. to get on top of the snow before it started getting soft and rotten. So like we would try to get on top of the snow when it was still kind of ice throughout the night, because by midday you would just be post-holing. So even before getting there, we realized Colorado was going to be a different hike. So we're like, okay, we could open up our miles, do the creed, but everybody in our trail family was really gung ho and like really passionate about that San Juan loop. We'd heard great things about it. We all wanted to stay as true to the original route as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something different with the CDT we can touch on later, is the routing systems too. But so we hit the San Juans, and it was a whole different type of travel. We done Sierra on the PCT with snow travel, but this snow travel, the ice chutes, as well as the snow fields, were a whole different level of steepness, where PCT, you fell, you were going to have a really bad time. Some of these chutes in the San Juans, you fell, you weren't going to come back from that. And we were really stubborn with gear. We didn't carry an ice axe or micro spike, so each step was very, very, very nerve wracking, but it helped get our fear of heights out of us.
Okay.
Wow, that sounds challenging and a bit dangerous as well in that sense.
Yeah, but we've learned as we've hiked, and we're not recommending at all to go out there with micros or ice axes. Please use micros and ice axes. It's just, from the PCT, when we went into the Sierras, we carried an ice axe, but we didn't have micros. And we had a goal that we had set for ourselves to never use that ice axe, because we're saying we don't want to fall. We don't want to slide down a mountain. Let's not have to use the ice axe.
Yeah.
So when we did the Sierras, also in a high snow year, we kind of felt confident with our foot placement in the snow. We felt good, and we had learned a pattern that worked for us. So going into the CDT, we knew we were going to get into snow eventually, but we didn't want to change up what had already worked for us. So we didn't want to start putting micros on. We didn't want to have to carry the ice axe, and it would be changing a pattern that we had grown comfortable with. And since then, we have used micros, and we found they are absolutely amazing. But
Yeah.
we were just very stubborn, and we got through. But looking back on that, if we would have had micros and an ice axe, we would have gotten through way more comfortably. And we had thought we were doing something that was the more comfortable route, when in fact we should have evolved and used micros and an ice axe. So
Yeah.
that's where kind of our own stubbornness got into play a little bit.
Yeah. Well, it seems like you learned from it.
Yeah,
So.
Learned a lot, because straight shoots, did not want to go down them, and Magpie, she's taught us the gift of micro spikes. So learned a lot from that mistake.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect.
But at that point, you were still not like, I mean, it was very challenging up until that, all the snow. And you said that towards the end of the hike, you started thinking about, what do I want to do after this? Do I want to continue hiking, make it more of a lifestyle? When you were dragging your feet through the snow, was that already playing in your mind, or was it like, what am I doing here?
It was close to what am I doing here. That wasn't the thoughts of what was next was not really going through, because especially that type of snow travel consumes your mentality almost fully, especially without an ice axe and micros. Each footstep was like 100% of my mind was like, okay, is this footstep okay? Like, so my mind was getting consumed a lot from that travel and that type of experience. So it didn't really start kind of rolling around in my mind, because I still had, even in Colorado, we still had 2,000 miles left of the trail. So we still had a long way to go. So it didn't start really rolling around in my mind until kind of Wyoming, the basin. These, not just the San Juans in Colorado, but that kind of entire stretch was a brutality onto itself, like epically beautiful. But even once we got out of the San Juans and the snow got a little bit better, we started getting near the tail end of monsoon season in Colorado, and we got rained on almost every day like clockwork. And it was just, our mind was so consumed with that travel and going through there, and just trying to be present with our trail family. And that sneaky thought of what next, we try, especially on the ATM PCT, we had that thought, like not the full what's next for hiking, but the when am I going to get to Katahdin, or when am I going to get to Canada, like a smaller what's next on each individual trail system. But we have always tried to push that out of our head, because we want to be present. We want to be on the trail. just enjoying the trail system. So we've gotten really good at that till where it doesn't really pop up unless we specifically want to think about it. So the CDT one with the bigger view of what next didn't really hit until kind of Wisconsin, not Wisconsin. That is a different trail system until Wyoming, in the Great Basin.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Perfect. Sorry, I just had a question skip my mind.
Okay. So you've been doing the trail. You hit towards the end, and you've made that decision of I'd like to continue. At least that's what you've done. So we we assume that at least that was what you came to the conclusion
It
of.
was, yeah.
What was then your next step?
So it wasn't a step on trail. It was all the steps off trail that was kind
Yeah.
of leading up to that. That conscious decision, it had been nagging at me on the CDT a lot. Is kind of there was a big separation in my life. There was kind of Ryan and Constantine. So there was like the on trail person,
Yeah.
then Ryan, the off trail person. They're one and the same person, but it felt like the gap was getting way too wide to kind of be comfortable. It was starting to feel uncomfortable of going out and doing trails for half a year and then coming back and working for half a year in a kind of dressed up kind of 9 to 5 job and just going through that pattern. It felt like I wasn't fully in the moment and fully merged with my two parts of my life that I wanted. And it wasn't becoming a want anymore. It was kind of becoming a need. Like these two separations were just becoming too much for me. So as I was getting close to the end of the CDT, I didn't think about what the work was going to look like. I kind of knew that coming off the CDT, I would have to go back to a 9 to 5 to go to the next trail system because unless you're super rich, you have to work in between trail systems. So I kind of knew coming off of the CDT that I would go back to work. And it was more of a shift in the thought of, can I continue to do trail systems? So it was just, even though it was a bigger shift, it was still smaller in the fact that I was starting to look at different trail systems I could do besides the big three. And in that small shift of looking at those other trails, my mind gradually started to pick up that being on those trails could be my cohesiveness and could be where I would find not only my play, but also my work. And that led into 2019 and 2020. But it was kind of like you said, it was one step at a time. It wasn't like an all at once aha moment. Like, this is exactly what I'm going to do. This is what I need to do to get there. It was just one step at a time. Like, just like the trail. I mean, I kind of stumbled into where I would get into 2019, and that steamrolled into where we were in 2020, and that steamrolled into 2021. So I'm getting outside of 2018, but it was a gradual process. I mean, it takes a while. Maybe my mentality was around moving slowly through the world because I'd been on trails for so long, but that's just what I was doing. It was just one step at a time, and I was getting there closer and closer as I was getting towards the end of the CDT.
Yeah.
And what is the first step that you then took after you finished the CDT to be able to get to the lifestyle that you have now?
So I've always been a workhorse. Once I got off the CDT, I literally went straight back to work. I was blessed to be able to work with 2 companies for these past 5 years that they'll hire me as soon as I get off trail. They knew trails was a part of my life, but still, I loved that work and I love working for them. But it was a blessing and it was great to have that. But it was still too far apart. It was still too far apart. So my first step coming off of that trail was we finished. We had about 2 days in East Glacier with trail family catching up. And then as soon as I got back to South Carolina, where I'm originally from, I went instantly back to work for 2 companies, and it was 7 days a week. And I structured that schedule for the 7 days a week because I knew in my mind, I didn't know where I was going yet with that, but I knew that 7 days a week of work schedule would put me in a good position to make that transition in 2019 to start to make the outdoors and the trail system more of a cohesive life and more of my work as well as play. So the first step was going back to work and just grinding it out. I mean, I've done that for 5 or 6 years now, and it's transitioned near the 2019, 2020, 2021, but always been a workhorse, and you have to do that. You have to do that to be able to experience this type of lifestyle. Like I was talking about, there's some people out there that are really blessed and really fortunate to have and funds to go after there year after year and not have to work. But especially being a younger hiker, I didn't have my 20s, because most of those people are usually 50s to 60s, and they're going out there having a great time because they've worked through the beginning stages of their life, their beginning years. And especially being younger and finding this passion, to get to the point you don't have the savings and you don't have the bank account from being a 50-year-old man or woman. So you have to go year after year back to work and continue to let that grow and let your passion grow and continue to follow it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's probably a challenge as well, because you can imagine being on the trail, being outdoors for so many months, and then all of a sudden being stuck in an office again for 7 days a week, especially in your case. That must be a mental challenge as well. Or is it purely because you know there's an end date?
It was especially off of the AT. So the AT transition into work looked a little different. So coming off of the first trail system, you hear post-trail blues, post-trail depression, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
For us, it was kind of like, yeah, we missed our trail family immensely, but we were also just super weird when we came off of the AT. So on the AT, what you were touching on, it was weird going back to work. And there was about a 2-week window that we didn't feel like we had been able to pop back into it. It felt like it had to take time to get reacclimated, get used to an office job, get used to a job site, that type of stuff. So coming off the AT, it did. Coming off of the PCT, our mentality had started to shift of, we knew that it was trail work, trail work, trail work. So we kind of knew that going in. There was still took a little bit to acclimate, maybe a few days instead of a few weeks. And then after the CDT, we had been doing it long enough that honestly, we felt like we had never left the office. We popped back in and we plugged right back in. And that's what we were talking about, the two halves. Like, we'd gotten good at it. We gotten good at having the mentality of trail and then the mentality of work, Ryan. And while that's a benefit and while that's a gift to be able to do that, it's still, we didn't like that shift. It felt uncomfortable having to do that shift all the time. And it's the same person, but it's just, with society, it blunts the edges. So like a lot of our interactions are with higher end clients, and with the higher end clients, you have to have a certain type of persona. And granted, we're a bubbly person. We like to ramble and we like to talk, but it's a lot of yes, sir, yes, ma'am, that type of stuff. And it's way different than being on trail and talking to your buddies and all that stuff. And we also love, and we kind of go back and forth on this, because we love that type of feel as well, but it's just not what we want anymore. It's just not what we had grown to really desire anymore. And when we had touched on this last episode about having that cookie cutter life, that's probably something that was there from our past that we were still trying to hold on to. And while we say we really like it, we do, but we don't want to go down that route anymore. We wanted to enmesh ourselves and be a full person in trail, about trail, and have a life on and off trail. So that's kind of what it was about. So that was a long answer to your question, but it was year by year. Off of the CDT, it wasn't a big acclimation. We had gotten good at it at that point.
Yeah, you say on and off the trail, you started working 7 days a week. Managing relationships, I guess, can then be tricky, because one, you're months away on trail, you don't see friends, you don't see family, but then you come back and you're basically working all the time. How do you manage those relationships?
My time is almost structured down to the minute each day. It is insanely. I've never gotten in the way of how stressful that can be. So like, I've been able to manage that sometimes by being able to look towards the trail and being able to be like, okay, I have this for month and a half, 2 months, 3 months, whatever it is. So I've gotten good at time management and relationships. That is a lot of the friends from real life. You can pick up a relationship where it left back
Yeah.
off. Like if they're a real friend, you can get back there and it feels like you're walking across the store parking lot and you just seen each other the other day, and you're able to pick it up right where it left off. So the relationships with friends, at least, was that way. Family, um, it's hard with trail. It's hard with family on trail because you want to be there and they want to be a part of your life, and
Yeah.
it's again time. And
Yeah.
we try our best to structure time and consciously choose and be a part of friends, family, work, everything in that kind of realm. And we sometimes let stuff slip through the cracks because it's hard. I mean, when you have such a rigorous schedule and such amount of time spoken for,
Yeah.
stuff does slip through the cracks. But when we're talking about relationships, we've been able to continue and grow the relationships since we started on the AT till 2020. Because when a person's a part of your life, I mean, they're a part of your life, and you might have distance and you might have time apart physically for
Yeah.
5-6 months, but it feels like a lot of the time we can pick it right where we left off. I mean, you can call someone and call a friend that you haven't talked to in 2 months, and they'll pick up and just love to hear your voice. And it's about, it's consciously choosing to be a part of somebody else's life and consciously choose to be a part of their time. So it was tricky. It was tricky structuring that off of the AT because, like I said, everything's a learning process.
Yeah.
So off of the AT, we would be hyper focused on friends. We would go to work and then hyper focus on friends, and we wouldn't think outside of that until that kind of cycle until the next trail. And that was great. I mean, we loved that experience, but we've just gotten better about managing time and being able to manage those relationships. So another long answer, but that's kind of what it looks like.
Do you feel that there's understanding from your family and friends?
Definitely. Some of them are, the understanding is like, what are you doing? But it's definitely understanding. They get that it's a deep, deep passion for me, and they understand that this is kind of where my life started to shift towards, and they're still a part of my life. I mean, they love to be shooting texts or doing a call when we're in town on trail and just checking in. And then when I get off trail, I love to be able to go and see them. And I haven't been able to give hugs this year because of
Yeah.
what's going on, but
Yeah.
still being able to stand that 6 feet apart. And we've been able to do outdoor dining where we're still far apart, and it's still being nice to be able to see them. And even if it's an hour out of 2 weeks, I mean, it's still within that hour, you can cover so much catching up. And especially with these things nowadays, the phones,
Yeah.
there's a way to stay in communication all the time with people. So I
Yes.
think when I came off of the AT, not super understanding, they were like, that's super weird. But once they realized that it wasn't just me being a weird hiker in the woods for 6 months, and they realized that it was like a deep-seated passion of mine, a friend will grow with you. So
Yeah.
they definitely understand.
Yeah. I mean, I can understand in the beginning when you come off your first trail. You mentioned as well, you've learned so much since on every trail that you've done, and you've grown and developed. So yeah, I can imagine that friends and family do the same thing along the way with you.
Yeah. And I mean, especially coming off of the first trail, as I touched on, it's a learning process. Like a lot of our friends, we had spent, let's see, we were 21 at that point. We had spent 5 years with them at that point. So we had spent so much time, and then we only spent 6 months apart on trail. And so that was really easy. That was really easy. And like, we just clicked back into it. And then as they started to see that it wasn't just a one-time deal, weird guy in the woods, weird Constantine in the woods hiking, they started to see it was a yearly thing. It was about adaptation. I mean,
Yeah.
it's hard to say exactly the process of it. It's kind of learning as you go. Like it was learning to be conscious of not only how much of the time is demanded from me, but they have lives off trail too. And it's be conscious of the demands of their life as well, and be able to structure and make sure I'm listening to them and listening to be a part of their life just as much as they're trying to reach out to me. So it's a growing process. You just kind of learn through it, and you have to adapt. Life is full of adaptation. So it's just going through it.
Yeah. And on the trail, do you keep in contact with them? Because like with mobile phones, etc., it's so easy these days. But is it something that you do, or is it more that you like you really focus on the trail at that stage and then get back in contact when you're off the trail?
So not like physically when I'm walking down the trail, but in trail towns. So when you go into resupply, do your laundry, kind of do your town chores, I'll shoot out however many texts I need to shoot out. And if I've gotten texts from them, I'll respond back. I'll try to consciously use my mornings in town. I'm a early riser, so I'll use my mornings in town to make calls and kind of touch base, have 20 minutes here, 30 minutes there, 40 minutes there. And it adds up quick. Like I said, managing time is, I've gotten good at it, but 20 minutes here, 30 minutes there, 40 minutes, it starts to add up. And I'll try to wake up even in town when I want to sleep in because I'm tired from trail. I'll try to wake up 4:30 or 5 a.m. so I can make those calls and be a part of their life. And depending on the time zone I'm in, sometimes it might have to be a little earlier, sometimes that might have to be a little later, but I make sure that I'm staying in contact with the people I love and the people I care about, because they're always a part of my life. Even if I'm out walking a trail in Europe, a trail in South America, I mean, my friends are my family and my family's my family. They're both all like one family. So it's just making that time no matter where you are and showing the love the way you can at that point. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think you mentioned in the conversation that we had that you met your partner Magpie on the CDT as well.
Not on the CDT, on the PNT.
PNT, sorry. Yeah, that was it. Sorry.
No worries. There's a lot of trail systems. I get them jumbled as well sometimes.
But how do you manage that relationship? Because you're both still hiking and not always the same trail systems, not always at the same time, I would imagine.
So you guys ready for a really long-winded response?
Please go ahead.
All right. Well, I guess all of mine are long-winded responses, but this one's special because, yeah, she is my partner and I love her so much. But this, especially with 2020, was a special year. So our plans, we met on the PNT 2019. We hiked that trail together. We had about a month-long window after the Pacific Northwest Trail that we kind of all went our separate ways, our trail family as well as Magpie and I. So we kind of all went our separate ways. That's when I did the Ice Age, but we'll touch on 2019 later. But she went back to Canada, and then we all met back up on the Arizona Trail to do that hike because we wanted to see each other again and continue and see where this could grow. So we did the AZT together, and then off of the AZT, we kind of knew it was that 2019, and we were building a life together at that point. And to build that life together, we both, again, had to go our separate ways and go towards work. So 2019, we finished November. We had December, January, February, March, April apart. And this past April, as you guys know, stuff started going crazy. So April came around, and that's when we had planned on meeting back up, because we were going to meet back up, and entire 2020, we were going to do all our trail systems together. And it was a great plan, awesome plan. And we were so stoked about it. And thankfully, we were still able to make a lot of this happen. So 2020 came, April came, borders were shutting down, all of this stuff started getting super serious. So early May, I went out and did the Natchez Trace Trail. I was able to run that out safely because there was no interaction with other communities. It was purely me in the wild, but I was able to run that out, and we had a goal. We're like, okay, I'm going to get to Canada and we're going to figure it out from there. We're going to figure out if we can do trail systems. We're going to figure out life. Because we were the most important thing in each other's lives and are the most important thing in each other's lives. So just getting to Canada, I needed to get across the border. So it becomes a full story of getting across the border too. So I had paperwork like this thick of every reason, because there was a reason on the Border Patrol's website. There was specific reasons that they could let you into the country. There was health and safety. There was I forget all the tiers, but there was so many tiers. There was a partnership tier, but like you had to hit a specific threshold. So like I had done our research. We both had tried to figure out how this could work. So hopped on a plane, hoped for the best, wore my mask, and got to Canada. they put me through 4 checkpoints to get to the last checkpoint. And I'm in the last checkpoint, and it was like the waiting room from hell, pretty much. I mean, there
Mm.
were 10 or 11 people in there. And while I was sitting in there, everybody got turned around to the country they came from. And so I go up to the final border security guy, and he's like, "Hey, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to turn you around." And I'm like, "That's kind of," I'm a stubborn person, so I'm like, "No," like I was trying to show him like how much research we had done, like we were moving in together, like we had been in a partnership for 8+ months at that point. We had been together without living together in that country. So
Yeah.
he tried to turn me around, and I'm like, there has to be a way. I mean, I showed him the booklet of paperwork I had, and he's like, well, let me check with my supervisor. So I go sit back down, checks with his supervisor. He's like, well, my supervisor still said no. We're gonna have to find you a plane and put you back to the U.S. And I'm like, I don't know. As it continued to grow, you could start to see his eyes start to become more compassionate. His eyes were very like hard. You could tell that was his job to turn people
Yeah.
back all day. And you could see that I wasn't just somebody that was a looky-loo trying to come in. You could see I actually had done my research. I knew what I was talking about. So he went back to his supervisor like 4 times until finally the supervisor gave him the green light, and he called me behind the security desk, which I don't think they're supposed to. And he's like, this is what I'm going to let you fall underneath under. He's like, it's a wiggle room here, but I'm going to technically put you underneath this category to come into the country.
Okay.
So I get through purgatory, and the drastic change of purgatory to where I got to. So I walk through these doors, and there's 5 people at this counter, like the official welcome to Canada counter. And they were so happy to see me. And I was like just in purgatory for like 2 hours. I'm like, oh, God, thanks, guys. And they're like, what flight were you on? And I told them the flight number. They look at their clock. They're like, you were in there a while. Oh, and I'm like, yeah. So that was a long-winded story about managing the relationship. But do you want me to continue kind of going through it? All right. So got up to Canada, and we spent the entire summer together. I had a visa for 6 months. So the visa I had was kind of it's not a holiday visa. I guess it's just a visitor's visa. It was just a visitor's visa that they gave me. So I had 6 months in the country. And especially this time of year with COVID and with everything going on, I couldn't apply for a work visa. I couldn't really apply for PR because we hadn't been common lawed at that point. So there was only one avenue to extend my time in the country, and that extension would only be 2 to 3 months because I would have to come back for the Florida Trail in February. So we talked it over a lot, and that only way to extend it would be a marriage license. And even though we really love each other and we both want that at some point, we always wanted to be, excuse me, we always wanted to make sure it's what we wanted at our timing, not COVID's timing. We didn't want to, even though we could have gone into that and been super thrilled, it would always be somewhat tainted looking back. Like, did COVID push us into that?
Yeah.
Did we make that decision ourselves, or did COVID throw us into it? So we had a lot of talks, a lot of working each other's schedules together, and it made the most sense. It made the most sense for me to come back to South Carolina for 2 to 3 months until I had to go to the Florida Trail anyway. So
Yeah.
managing that relationship, it's easy because we love each other so much. Let all the logistics go out the window, but it's easy. We both are very passionate about the life that we have together. We're very passionate about the trails we do separately, but we're very passionate about being together, and it kind of makes everything else around that easy. It's easy to manage that. I mean, it's hard to be physically apart because you miss the person, but
Yeah.
it's easy to manage a relationship where there's so much love. So another long-winded story for you guys.
Yeah, it's that's definitely then one of the sacrifices that you have to make, part of this lifestyle, and being in a relationship with someone from Canada instead of the United States, which would have been slightly easier. But then what are some of the more sacrifices that you feel like you're making to live this lifestyle?
So the sacrifices come into the 20s being a big, excuse me, transitional point for people. So the 20s, at least the way we look at it, is when you find your career path, when you find your family, and this is a very narrow focus, and granted, we don't necessarily want that cookie cutter focus anymore, but we felt, at least as we were going down the path, that we were missing out on being able to be with our friends every day, not just sporadically. We felt we have trail family, and that connection is giant, giant, giant. But even though managing the relationships of friends and family off a trail, it's still, you're not there with their daily lives. I mean, that's a big, big part. And you can, especially with these things, you can hear about it, but you don't get to feel it. And that's not just with friends and family, that's with especially the sacrifices that Magpie and I both make to be able to live this life. So it kind of leads into every, not friends, not family, not partner, it's every relationship that kind of goes into. And they're all strong relationships, but there's something that at least we personally feel that it feels sad when you can't be that involved and personal and in everyday life. Like, even if you don't see your friend every single day when you're off trail or back home, if you were just doing that regular lifestyle, you would see them twice a week maybe, and it would still be like you were more fully along their life path as well. So it's, a lot of the sacrifices do tend to be with relationships, and we found a way to make those sacrifices work and everybody be happy. But it's sometimes sad not being able to, like, our buddy just got married 3 weeks ago, and we weren't able to go to the marriage ceremony, well, of COVID. But that journey towards marriage for him, all we got to hear about it was through a phone, through some calls, and we didn't get to sit down with him and his fiance. We knew his fiance, but we didn't get to be a part of that journey, like, physically with him. And that was tough for us. So it's a lot of relationships, and then the sacrifices, didn't pronounce that word right. Sacrifices tend to lead into the time again, because when you're doing these types of trail systems, you're going to be gone for half a year, and so you consolidate life through a full year into that however many months you are off trail. And that becomes super, super hectic. So the sacrifices are making sure that you have time for everything. And it's very difficult to compress the amount of not only work, but relationships, life just in general, into a few month window. And it feels like we're sometimes on a treadmill, and we're starting to get away from that treadmill, but it feels like we're always in motion before being in motion on trail, if that makes sense. Like, our mind is purely thinking in, like, it feels like it thinks in 1,000 directions at once, and it's just, it becomes tiring. You get tired before you even step foot on trail, and I don't know, it's a lot. So sacrifices kind of seep into, it's not just everyday life, but it's kind of every moment, because your mind is always thinking of how you're gonna, it's not just thinking of tomorrow, it's thinking about 3 or 4 months down the road when you're on trail, what's gonna work. So everything kind of ties into each other, and while that's great, it's a lot too.
Are you really exhausted when you start the trail? Do you notice that the first few days are that you have a lot of tension that you need to kind of get rid of first?
So mentally, I'm exhausted the day before trail. So, like, when I get to the town, or I've done all the travel to get to the spot, the trail close to the trailhead. So I'm exhausted at that point, because my mind's still on that like 24/7 cycle pretty much. So I'm exhausted at that point, but pretty much as soon as I step foot on trail, the excitement and just the passion of being on any trail system, like the Natchez Trail was our first trail this year, and with this being a weird year, it was mostly road walk. That's just what the Natchez Trail is. But even on that road walk, I mean, we were ecstatic to be walking a road. Like, we were so excited. And so the first day on trail, we're just, I don't know, everything else kind of goes away. It's still there, and we still have to manage that. But the first day is kind of like just fully being back out there, and just like letting trail just be, fully immerse ourselves in it. And it's a beautiful feeling. I mean, we are looking forward to that so much right now.
So in that sense, you would definitely say that the sacrifices are worth the reward that you have when you're on the trail.
Yes, if you want this type of lifestyle. So it's all depends on personal preference. Like if it's something that is your drive and your inner passion, of course the sacrifices are gonna not weigh as heavily as being able to be out there. So it's gonna be matched. So it's preference. We know some people that do the 3 trails and that was enough of this lifestyle for them, and that's great. And when we keep talking about this lifestyle too, for the pattern of the past 5 or 6 years, we'll touch on this I think next week, but it started to shift. So it's gotten to the point that it shifted outside of as much of A B A B A B, like a schedule like that. It's started to mesh and be one, and that takes away a lot of the stress that comes along with having those 2 separate parts of life. So you can get to the point. You are gonna have to make a lot of sacrifices those first couple years to get to that point. You're gonna have to sacrifice time. You're gonna have to sacrifice money being on trail. You're gonna have to sacrifice a lot of things. But if you want to continue down that path, it does get better. But those first couple years, as you figure it out, like anything, it's figuring it out, and it's gonna demand almost all of you, because that's what you want to be a part of. You want to be fully in it, so it's gonna demand a lot of stuff from you.
Yeah, definitely. And what would be your, maybe it's a difficult one to answer, but your ideal scenario, like the balance? How do you see the two, the Ryan and the Constantine, merge together in the future?
Yeah, so this would kind of lead into 2019, but I can touch on it here as well. So 2019, I was looking at buying a gear company, and there was a small gear company. There's a huge story behind that too. I stumbled into this as well, but didn't work out buying the gear company. We had different ideas of where it wanted to go. The owner would have never really stepped out of it. He was it was a small gear company, but I wanted to still continue to pursue that because I had found the best gear that had ever worked for me. I'd found a pair of shorts specifically that were 4,000 miles strong and never broke. So that kind of led me into, oh, well, if I'm not going to buy the full company, can I purchase the rights to the pants and the shorts? And he was okay with that. So we were both happy about that. And that led in from 2019 to 2020. Hadn't founded the business yet, hadn't done all of that. But 2020, this summer, the business went live and I was able to kind of consolidate. And that's where that journey brought me. I was kind of able to consolidate the 2 halves. So now still running a business, but also that business revolves fully on trail. As you guys know, you guys have a business that revolves fully around trail. So it not only lets the day-to-day actions and thoughts be based in trail, but it's kind of like everything. We're still a mesh in the community when we're off trail. So now it feels like the off trail and the on trail, there's not as big of a drastic difference. And so the perfect scenario, that's another long ramble, but the perfect scenario would kind of look like doing our hikes and doing our passion, because our hikes tie into our company and our company ties into our hikes. So doing both of those and being able to grow those and manage those together and see where it goes. So that's kind of what the perfect scenario looks like. And in that perfect scenario, not having to leave Canada again because of COVID. So after 2020, we actually have hit the threshold that we can apply for common law, and we can apply for the stuff in Canada that would let us not have to worry about a visa problem if it arises again. So perfect scenario, hiking, 11 skies, Magpie.
Yeah, definitely.
I made it easy. Oh, big 3. There you go.
Very good. Yeah.
Yeah. See, maybe my rambles lead to like one sentence of good stuff, but the rest of it sometimes just goes on.
No, good.
No, there's a lot of useful information in there. So
Cool.
Absolutely.
Very
just
cool.
quickly, because you mentioned that you eventually want to move to Canada, but are you still currently in South Carolina? Is that still your home base?
So that's that would tie into the sacrifices. So the home base is also weird. Coming off the AT, crash on buddies' couches a lot of time until got a different apartment. Off of PCT, kind of same scenario, and CDT, same scenario. So never really had a, when I say home base, it's not like I own property in South Carolina or have an apartment that I always come back to.
Yeah.
It's kind of, it grows. So for me personally, even though it's a home base is in where I work right now and where I'm temporarily until I hit trail, it doesn't feel like the home base of being with Magpie and being out on trail together and being in Canada. So the mentality of home base has shifted with this type of lifestyle too. It's not the physical, it's not really the physical place you are, it's where your heart and mind are, and heart and mind are with Magpie. So my home base is where she is right now, and I'm in South Carolina. It's a place to be until the Florida Trail working, and it's the home base shifts as with this lifestyle. So that's kind of another long ramble to the question, but
we can certainly relate. For us, it changes about every year.
Yeah,
we hardly stay on the same spot, same country for a long time, and we've been lucky that way that we have been able to live in multiple countries and would love to continue doing so.
But I think we can really relate to your feeling there as well. It's like, as long as we're together, then we're home. It doesn't matter in which country we are and in what kind of house we live at that moment, or whether we just camp, for example. As long as we're together, that's,
I love that.
As well. So I can totally relate to that.
It's the physical. I mean, it's just physical surroundings around where you guys feel close and feel home together. The hearts and the minds kind of meld. That's beautiful. I love that you guys feel that as well.
And when you were talking earlier about the relationships with friends and family, it's completely the same for us. We were also mid-20s when we moved abroad, and have been moving about. But then every time when you come back, or when you take the time to talk, either through Skype or just a phone call, then it's as if they're still around, but you're still far away.
Well, very cool. You guys have been going through it as well. It's just it's adaptation. It's just going through and learning life as you go. I mean, that cookie cutter life that we talked about, there would probably be bumps along that road. There'd probably be different things, like somebody's that's looking into this type of lifestyle that we both share, sees this and sees just the livelihood and just the fun and all of that. And we look over there and might not see the fun anymore in that, but we look over there and we see, oh, it looks easy, but it's everybody has life stuff and they have to go through it and figure it out as they go along. So
no, definitely.
It doesn't come with a manual, unfortunately.
It comes with guidebooks, but not a manual.
That's true. Perfect.
Cool.
Maybe one last question. Last time we asked as a closing question one tip that you could give, and I think we want to ask this time a bit more of a leading in question in some more of a topic that we want to discuss next time as well. So next time we probably want to touch a bit more on gear
and the logistics and everything around
as
it.
well. So what is your most important or your most precious gear item that you always have with you?
I wish I would have brought it today. It is a balaclava. So it is, I kind of have this multicolored balaclava that covers everything besides the eyes. And I wore that for 10 days straight this year on the GDT only took it off when I went to sleep, and it smelled absolutely horrible in there. But it would have been, a lot of these trails would have been drastically different without covering this type of area in the snow and in the cold. And I get cold very easily. So like my head freezes, my nose freezes, my mouth freezes. And it's with that kind of covering and that face mask there, I've been able to push through very, very, very cold situations. Not comfortably, but still more comfortable than I would have been. So the balaclava, I would say best gear recommendation is, especially in colder environments, find something that you're not going to be if you're going lightweight while backpacking, you're not going to be always warm until you get to camp. Even when you get to camp, you might not be super comfortable depending how lightweight you went, but I would try to find a threshold of comfort in the gear that you use. So if you're super cold, make sure to pack out something that covers the head and the face, because that's where a lot of the heat will leave. And it feels like a furnace when you're breathing in the balaclava itself too. So you like heat it itself. It gets nasty in there, but you got to heat your face as well. So the balaclava that we have.
Okay, awesome.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much again for this chat.
Thank
we
you
enjoyed
guys.
it.
Absolutely.
I think there's quite a few things that are, especially for
Invaluable
people,
information.
especially people that are, like you touched upon before, like people looking outside in, not really knowing about the lifestyle or what it entails. That there's definitely a lot of information there that can at least paint a little bit of a picture of what that will be like.
Yeah, and I'll try to tie it down, because I did hit broad picture kind of, but at least being able to know that it's not all glamorous. It's not all
definitely.
It's not all that is a beautiful scene out there. He's looking over a lake or he's looking over a mountain. And that even ties into getting to that scenic point. You have to put in a lot of physical effort. And it's like any life. You have to put in physical effort no matter what you're doing to get to a certain point. So it lets people know that it's not all roses. To be cliche about it, it's not all roses, and you got to work for it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Well, we look forward to the next one where we then touch upon 2019 and the trails you did then. We'll see you then.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, you guys have a great week too, and thanks so much.
We hope you enjoyed that interview as much as we did. And if you have a story to share yourself, please make sure to contact us via contact@tellyourtrail or leave a comment below. We can't wait to hear from you.
Be adventurous.
Be adventurous.